welcome to The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here are the reports we'll be looking at in the half hour. 12 people killed in a suicide bomb attack in Islamabad, Pakistan. Car blast kills 9 people in India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says those responsible will not be spared. And the US Senate passes funding bill as longest ever shutdown nears likely end. Let's begin The World Today. 12 people have been killed in a suicide attack in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad. At least 27 more people suffered varying degrees of injuries. The country's Minister for Interior, Mohsin Naqvi, says the bomber was planning to attack the district courthouse but was unable to get inside. The attacker then detonated the bomb close to the police car after waiting for up to 15 minutes. One lawyer who said he was parking his car outside the court at the time described hearing a loud bang. Videos of the aftermath of the attack showed plumes of smoke rising from a charred vehicle behind a security barrier. Pakistani President Asif Ali Zardari says he strongly condemns the suicide blast. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif claims that extremist groups actively backed by India were involved. Delhi has not responded to the accusations. Well, in India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has vowed those behind a car explosion in Delhi that killed 13 people and injured 20 others will be brought to justice. He was making the pledge during his visit to Bhutan. Prime Minister Modi expressed condolences to the victims and their families, stating that he had been in constant contact with security agencies through the night. The blast, which occurred a day earlier near the historic Red Fort, marked the first major explosion in the Indian capital in over a decade. Bhutanese Prime Minister Shering Tobgay extended his condolences on behalf of the government. And it's only been a couple of days since Typhoon Fong swept through the Philippines, and multiple communities in the province of Bulacan are still dealing with the floodwaters. The situation has paralyzed daily life there. Residents can be seen wading through waist-deep water as rescuers navigate submerged streets and volunteers deliver food and aid to affected households. Media reports say at least 8 people have been killed and more than 1 million more displaced nationwide. Around 15,000 residents were forced to evacuate in Bulacan, where floodwaters remain high due to rising tides and backflow from nearby rivers and low-lying communities. Syria's transitional president Ahmed al-Sharaa is the latest world leader at the White House, meeting with US President Donald Trump. And following their meeting, he described it as a new era. The US confirmed Syria is set to join an international coalition to combat Islamic State. Washington will also extend sanctions relief with new measures to give compliance clarity for investors and a 180-day suspension of the Caesar Act, which was introduced to sanction the country in 2019. The Syrian leader arrived on Sunday, just 2 days after the US U-turned on branding him a specially designated global terrorist. It marks the first visit by the country's president since independence in 1946. Sharaa took control of Syria as interim president in January and promised inclusive government following the armed takeover of the country 11 months ago, which led to the fall of Bashar al-Assad's government.
He comes from a very tough place, and he's a tough guy. I liked him. I get along with him. The new president of Syria. And we'll do everything we can to make Syria successful because that's part of the Middle East. We have peace now in the Middle East, first time that anyone can remember that ever happening. A very big part of the Middle East, very important part. If you look back at Syria for years, they had the doctors, the lawyers, they had so many of the great intellects. It's an amazing place with great people, and we want to see Syria be successful along with the rest of the Middle East. So I have confidence that he'll be able to do the job, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin.
On Syria, can we expect an announcement on a pact between Syria and Israel, or an announcement on them joining the anti-ISIS coalition?
Yeah, you can expect some announcements on Syria. We want to see Syria become a country that's very successful, and I think this leader can do it. I really do. I think this leader can do it. And people said he's had a rough past. We've all had rough pasts. But he has had a rough past, and I think, frankly, if you didn't have a rough past, you wouldn't have a chance. He gets along very well with Turkey, with President Erdogan, who's a great leader. Erdogan's a great leader, and very much in favor of what's happening in Syria. We have to make Syria work. Syria is a big part of the Middle East, and I will tell you, I think it is working and really well. We're working also with Israel on, getting along with Syria, getting along with everybody. And that's working amazingly. As you know, Hamas has given us back numerous bodies. It sounds pretty gruesome, but it's something the parents want more than if their son had been living. Hard to believe. I've seen all of the parents, so many of the parents, and getting back the body of their son, their dead son, is as vital to them, as important to them, as if the boy was generally the boy. The boy was alive. And as you know, over the last 4 or 5 days, we've gotten a lot of the additional bodies that they said they were going to. They've worked very hard to do that. So we have peace in the Middle East. It's a great thing, and nobody's ever seen anything quite like it.
U.S. President Donald Trump. Well, staying with President Donald Trump, there's still reactions to the BBC's Panorama program, editing part of his speech on January 6, 2021. The broadcast acknowledged that footage from 2 different moments had been combined, altering Trump's remarks, a revelation that sparked widespread criticism and demands for accountability. Despite resignations by the BBC's Director General and CEO of News, the U.S. president says it could sue the broadcaster for $1 billion. It's given them up until Friday to give a response. Londoners have had some time to ruminate on the issue.
I think it's unbelievable. They're making it sound like it was a mistake. Rather than 2 pieces of thing being spliced together, it's unbelievable. I think the biggest thing is that GB News, I think they broke it quite a long time ago. And the BBC's only just kind of come out now. They haven't been showing both sides of it. They certainly haven't been showing the bad commentary about Hamas. I know they've been really biased as regards that. I think it's unbelievable. Trustworthiness, I'd only give them 5. Because it's really plummeted. And they haven't taken cognizance of the people high up in the organisation. It's almost like they ignored them.
I think the issue at hand is the fact that they misled the people about some reporting about January 6th with Trump. An act that the entire world knows he committed. He's complicit, he's fascist, he's a Nazi, and now they're capitulating to him. They've lost trust. I think their handling of the Gaza, not even Gaza, the genocide in Palestine, and the fact that Israel is a genocidal, maniacal, evil state, and the fact that they haven't covered it accurately, much like The Guardian, much like the New York Times, which are my trusted media sources. I'm 50. I grew up with them. These are the places that I went to, and I can not longer rely on them. They had the best year ever with the traders. They've renewed sort of an appetite for consumption from young people. And this is nonsensical and minimal, and I don't understand why they had to resign. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's a patrimony of humanity. There's probably no other organization in the world that's done more for education, that's done more to bring up information on parts of the world that most others wouldn't know. I think over the last few years, over the last 10, 15 years, when, from the Tories to now, I think they live in a state of paranoia, and they're afraid of donors and they're afraid of the power brokers, rather than really understanding what the public wants.
We all know their bias. They go with whatever the government says, whoever pays them the most money. They're by no means impartial. They have their favourite parties, they have their favourite politicians, they have their favourite countries who invest, so...
Well, back in the U.S., the Senate has passed a bill to fund the federal government through January and end the longest shutdown in U.S. history. The bill, which passed 60 to 40 with support from a handful of Democratic senators and nearly all Republicans, will be sent to the House of Representatives. If it does pass the House, the legislation will head to President Donald Trump to be signed into law. Earlier Monday, the U.S. president said he supports the funding deal, which was negotiated between Republicans and a gang of moderate Senate Democrats, nearly 6 weeks after the shutdown began on October 1st. House Speaker Mike Johnson told his Republican conference earlier on Monday he wanted GOP House members to begin traveling to Washington, D.C. for a vote on the bill.
On this vote, the ayes are 60, the nays are 40. The bill as amended is passed. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered made and laid upon the table.
I want to thank our House counterparts, particularly Chairman Cole, who worked night and day with us on getting conference agreements, and our Democratic colleagues who courageously realized that we could not let this shutdown continue to go on, with the harmful consequences growing worse with each passing day.
Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird has been keeping an eye on this story. Maria, has President Donald Trump signed the bill?
Well, he has not yet signed the bill, but it is awaiting his signature, hopefully, if the House is able to pass. And I say hopefully because I think Americans are hopeful that this government shutdown will end. As we know, there's close to 2 million people that are federal employees. And so it's really hitting the pockets of Americans a great deal. And so as we've seen, some Democrats came across the aisle. There were several amendments to the bill to allow this to pass in a 60-40 vote last evening.
And I wonder, Maria, how the impact of this negotiation and agreement between the Republicans and the Democrats did play out, how it impacted on other sectors, of the government. It's almost like, getting a whiff of water when you're in the desert or something.
Yes, and the other sectors have been greatly impacted. As we know, this means pretty much everything in the government has been shut down, except for some of those critical areas. And as we know, there has been an extensive amount of pressure on the FAA and on the aviation, on being able to have the airlines continue, right? Because those individuals were not being paid, those who were doing the security, the TSA, making sure the planes were not crashing into one another, that they were, all of those things were still operating, even though they were not receiving a paycheck. Some did decide not to come to work, which caused, as you know, a reduction in the number of flights that could go out each and every day. And so this has had tremendous impact. And the challenge that we all know is what we saw during COVID is that when you reopen the government after such a long shutdown, it really does take time for things to kind of get back operational. It's like a machine, right, that's been off for a period of time. And so, as you said, a drink of water, I think it's a sip, and hopefully they'll be able to really allow the economy, which has already been suffering, to really revive after this.
Maria, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask, what the impact is on other sectors. I mean, knowing that this was, the bill has been passed, and then, how quickly life can return to normal for many Americans. I hear those TSA lines are going as long as outside of the airport. So that, of course, needs to be cleared up really quickly. But have authorities thought about the risk this is to the American people and to America's security in the first place?
Yes, this has been a tremendous impact on security. And so there's hope that the House, because remembering there's still one more step in this process, the House must also pass the bill, which they're expecting that vote to happen as early as Wednesday. There is great hope that that will pass the House. But as we know, there could still be things that could challenge that, whether it's a filibuster, because one of the greatest things that Democrats have been asking for is around health care and Obamacare, which is not included in this bill. Now, there has been inclusions to ensure that a vote on this and discussions happen thereafter the signing of this bill. But as intents and purposes of what Democrats were asking for, that is something that has not necessarily made it through this one. And again, as we mentioned too, this is only until January. So there's a lot of impact that this is obviously still work to be done because we have not yet got it to the point where the president will have it on his desk for signature. And as you said, the long lines and airline travel, we're heading up against the holiday season. People are very concerned of whether or not their holiday travel with Thanksgiving coming will be able to be executed in the same way. So people are also thinking of other avenues for travel, maybe even driving if they're going to close proximity locations.
I can't even imagine how chaotic this travel season will be. And I know that Thanksgiving is just about a week away, I think. So Americans really have a lot to think about. But just very quickly before you go, Maria, the BBC documentary, President Trump has reacted to that. He says he's going to sue. Has he made progress on that? Although he's given the BBC up until Friday to respond.
Yes, as you mentioned, he's giving them up until Friday to respond. Now, we know with the dismissal or the resignation of the two executives within the BBC could be what he's looking for. He could be looking for what obviously has been apologies and a recognition of what he claims as it relates to that documentary around January 6th and the editing that did not portray the full picture from his perspective. And so I think that what we'll see is how the BBC responds between today and Friday. I will have a heavy leaning on whether or not he pursues a suit against the BBC. But this potentially could be what he was looking for as a response to what he says was not an accurate portrayal of him in the documentary.
Well, it sure will be a precedent or something. Thanks again, Maria, for speaking with us. Eyes and ears on the ground, always. Our correspondent, Maria Bird. Well, Catherine Connolly has been sworn in as President of Ireland today. In her inauguration speech, she said she will ensure that all voices are represented, heard and valued. She said she stood before those gathered humbly and proudly as the 10th president of this beautiful country, adding, the change that led to the joyful day began with the small group of elected representatives and volunteers facing what appeared to be insurmountable challenges. We were led to believe that it was too great a leap, that our ideas were too far out, too left, at odds with the prevailing narrative and shared conversation all over the country. However, it became evident that the dominant narrative did not reflect or represent people's values and concerns. Time and again, she says, people spoke of how it served to silence, to other, to label, to exclude, and to stifle critical thinking. She says, along with that meaningful engagement, we saw the emergence of hope. We saw the emergence of joy, along with the courage and determination of people to use their voices to shape a country that we can be proud of. The United Nations Climate Conference has begun in Brazil with a call for faster action and more togetherness. Our correspondent Ayola Kasim reports.
It's the first day of COP and the queues are back. Long winding queue for registration, water, food, even to obtain a cashless payment card. That's because for the first time, a unified payment system is introduced as no other card or cash is accepted in the COP venue.
Bom dia a todos.
But right inside the main plenary, attention is focused on the matters at hand.
President Lula.
The Brazilian president reminds delegates and their government to put people at the heart of the climate agenda.
Global warming could push millions of people to hunger and poverty, and that we can have setbacks of decades of advancement. The unproportional impact of climate change on women, Afro descent, migrants, and marginalized groups that should be taken into account in the adaptation policies.
Why climate disasters decimate the lives of millions when we already have the solutions? The head of the United Nations Climate Convention says this will never, ever be forgiven.
To falter once mega droughts wreck national harvests, sending food prices soaring, makes zero sense economically or politically. To squabble while famines take hold, forcing millions to flee their homelands. This will never be forgotten as conflicts spread. The economics of this transition are as indisputable as the costs of inaction.
So, delegates will now resume the first plenary meeting of COP30.
With the fourth version of the provisional agenda uploaded against the COP, many were expecting an agenda fight, but the COP presidency scored a first win with that, with what has been called a successful agenda ceasefire.
Of CMA 7.
For Nigeria, the head of the delegations says this is an implementation COP for the country aimed at having a clear shift from ambition to execution.
In terms of, one of my favorites, climate finance, the delivery, what we've done there, a major milestone was, of course, we all know, was the approval of our national carbon market framework. And this has set the tone for the way Nigeria really wants to be showcased. And it's clear that Nigeria is no longer preparing for implementation. We have entered the implementation phase, and we've backed it by governance structures, financial instruments, and robust measurable systems.
Meanwhile, civil society groups are pointing out that developed countries providing public finance is key to ensure that climate action does not create new debt traps or rely on false solutions that threaten equity and climate justice. From the Hunger Convention and Fair Center of the Amazon in Berlin, Brazil, Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
Back here in Africa, the 6th Conference of Land Policy is underway in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, bringing together African leaders, policymakers, and development experts. They're calling for sweeping land reforms to address poverty, inequality, and the legacy of colonial dispossession. The opening ceremony featured performances of traditional dance and spoken word monologues celebrating African identity and resilience.
The African Union leadership in this space has committed to dialogues and ensuring that this theme is implemented. As we look ahead, the AU is asserting that the work of justice and reparations must be situated within Africa's contemporary development agenda, not as a historical afterthought, but as a pillar for sustainable transformation.
Land is the foundation of food security, social and sustainable economic development, and if managed equitable for the benefit of all citizens, it is the bedrock for social and political stability. Through our land reform programs, we are also establishing the basis for addressing the scourges of poverty, inequality, unemployment, and underdevelopment. The United Nations Committee of Experts on Global Geospatial Information has for more than a decade led the development of a coordinated global system for governing geospatial data. South Africa is currently serves as co-chair of the committee, representing the African continent, with the other co-chairs being Saudi Arabia and the United States of America. Through this position, Africa contributes directly to shaping the global policies and standards that ensure that spatial information supports sustainable development.
And as we end the program, I bet you haven't seen this one before. I'm talking about a group of robots playing on a replica of an ancient bronze percussion instrument known as guidao in China. We'll see. Oh, there it is, thankfully. And this is all happening in a ceremony signifying an unprecedented milestone in Chinese sports, marking the first national games co-hosted by the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area. Chinese President Xi Jinping attended the opening ceremony. Wow, this is just wonderful to watch. He attended the ceremony alongside International Olympic Committee President Kirsty Coventry and Honorary President for Life Thomas Bach. The 75-minute performances, categorized into 3 parts, seamlessly blended the heritage and modern spirit of the Greater Bay Area through music, dance, and digital technology. You can watch the performances. However, if you're in Guangzhou, by chance from the 9th to the 21st of November. There'll be at least 34 sports with 419 events in the competitive program. We saw the robots at the beginning, but it's clear they were not the only spectacle at this performance. Thanks again for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Frank.